name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here among you all. Let's see some familiar faces and not so familiar faces. It's always a pleasure to be here and to be among you, and I thank you all for the invitation. Today we get to speak about the importance of dialogue in the family. Miriam informed me of like the Q&A at the end and how it's anonymous. It's probably a good idea so we don't like the confession. We say, well, what do you do? So and so. So hopefully we'll address some things, and most of this is nothing new. How many of us here have children? Okay, great. So originally I had formulated this presentation to be geared towards communication between parents and children, but many of the principles are, applicable to your spouse as well. So if you think about like most problems that I've seen, in families, thus far, a lot of them are attributed to poor communication. Majority of them, among other things, but a lot of them are about communication. Communication can be nonverbal and verbal, as you all know. They say 65% of communication is nonverbal, which is true. And I think, when you like consider like texting, over the, messages versus FaceTime versus something in person, you can tell the clear difference. That's why there's a good rule of thumb is that whenever you have a disagreement with your spouse, or even maybe with your children, it's not done over messages because there's a lot of room for error and misunderstanding. Sometimes, for example, smiling at a child or smiling and saying good morning to your spouse is a form of communication. And sometimes it is going to be by that first look. You're like, oh, here we go. This is going to be one of these days. All right? From your children or your spouse. Look what the Lord Jesus did with St. Peter. If you remember, after he denied him 3 times, it says that while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And then it says that St. Peter went out and wept bitterly. So the Lord really didn't say anything this time, but it was just the look, and this reminded St. Peter of what the Lord had told him already. So this was a form of nonverbal communication by the Lord. Verbal communication can be divided into 2 primary methods, both monologue and dialogue. Dialogue, of course, communicates love. And also we have to remember that silence is also a form of communication. And sometimes this is kind of like, can be stronger and more troublesome than communicating, is the silence, or giving the silent treatment, whether it's to spouses or to children. Communicating is easy, but a dialogue, of course, is more difficult. How about some dialogue in the Bible? Can anybody think of any dialogues in the Bible? It'd be easy. The whole Bible is filled with dialogue. The Samaritan woman, right? Great. Had a dialogue with the Lord Jesus, right? There was a giving and taking, right? Where else? Mary and Archangel Gabriel. There's a dialogue between the Archangel telling her that she will bear the Lord Jesus, Son of the Highest. Where else? How about from the very beginning? Even the serpent and Adam and God, right? There was a dialogue, So from the very beginning, there are dialogues all over Scripture. And if you remember, part of God's dominion that he gave to Adam over the creation was to name them. So it becomes personal, it becomes his. So there's this kind of communion between man and nature. And same thing between Adam and Eve. So between God and Adam, between the serpent and Eve, and between Adam and Eve as well. And if you remember, Adam said of Eve that she's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And this was to remind Adam that there's deep unity between the 2 of them, and this will require their honest communication with each other. And of course, the fall, as we said, there is the dialogue as well. So what is the importance of dialogue? Number one, it's the key to understanding. If there's no dialogue, then we can't understand. And maybe you might, incur this in your marriages, or even with your children. There's almost an element of, you should have read my mind. And, well, how can I read your mind if you didn't tell me? Or if I say something and I leave out some of the details and I expect my partner to fill in the blank. If I can't fill in the blank, I don't know. Well, we've been married for 15, 20 years. You should know. This still doesn't matter how long you're married. You can't just fill in the blanks. You get better at it, but you can't automatically assume that you can fill in the blanks. It's the key to understanding. A marriage without dialogue becomes a silent contract and not a living covenant. Again, it's something that's very dynamic. And I think it, with time, the communication evolves, and it kind of goes higher in degree. You ever seen like an elderly couple, the real old couple, they've been married like 50, 60 years, and they can just sit next to each other and not say a word, and they're completely happy. Abu Yanan was telling me when he used to go to Egypt, or when he was younger, he would go visit his Giddu, and his Giddu was like methodical. It was like you wake up at 4 a.m., he prayed, he read the newspaper, he did this, and then there was this time for the tea time. So he would go and he had tea with his father, and they said nothing for like an hour. Nothing. And we just sat there, looked out out of the balcony, and that was it. And he asked like his grandfather how was it? He said, I had a good time. They didn't say anything. But it's just that, connection of being with each other. Frequent communication protects the marriage from assumptions, distance, and coldness. And as difficult as sometimes the discussions might be, but if we don't have them, this will be the result. We'll grow distant from each other. There'll be assumptions that aren't correct that we have to make, and the distance will grow between the two. Children, when you don't communicate with them, they often complain that they don't understand me. My parents don't understand me. They're from a different generation or a different culture. And they say they don't feel heard or they don't feel understood. So it's important that we communicate. And I tell the kids this all the time. I tell them, when you speak with your parents, them not agreeing with you doesn't mean they don't understand. It means they just disagree. They understand, and they, but they disagree. So I tell them, you communicate with them and you share with them your perspective, and once you're sure they understand, then that's it. Anything of that is just, now you're just annoying them, talking back, and things tend to escalate. So once you make your point, leave it at that. Whether they agree or disagree, you leave it at that. Also, the dialogue is key to knowing. How do you know your children's struggles or inner struggles, or who their best friends are, or their desires, or their ambitions, and so on? And I think this is so important, because if you think about, if they go to a school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, we have no idea who they're around or what they're talking about. I remember I was working with, before I was a priest, I was working in a company, and I had this technician that worked with us, and she was a very sweet lady. She was very wise too. Every day I would ask her, like, what are your plans after school? And every day she's like, I'm going to take my son and his friends to soccer. I'm going to take them to basketball. I'm going to take them to this. I felt like she was just a chauffeur afterwards. So then one day I asked her, why do you do this? She's like, well, it gives me like a glimpse of what they, what's going on in their friend group. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I go and I pick them up, and my son will sit in the front seat and his friends will be in the back seat, and they just talk and I don't utter a word. They can say the most outlandish things and she never opens her mouth. Even if she disagrees, she just stays silent. She said, somehow I was able to like blend with the seat and they didn't even think that I was there. She heard everything their friends were talking about, even if maybe it wasn't something to her liking, but she stayed silent. But she knew what they were talking about because she allowed them the space to dialogue, even though it wasn't with her, but she allowed them that space to dialogue. So it's very important that we have this time with our children to spend and ask them about who their friends are, what happened at school, um, what do you want to be, and all this. Also again applies to our spouses as well. If we do not dialogue, the mental and emotional distance between us will grow, as we said before. The desire for unity and connection will grow cold, whether children or spouse. Also, the dialogue promotes closeness. It promotes a mutual concern for one another. You know, if there's one of the spouses gets into trouble or is hurt or whatever, and or maybe they about to get in a car accident and thank God everything was okay, and they get home a little shaken, again, when we have that dialogue, it promotes this. Okay, this person cares about me because they're asking, and I'm able to share, rather than just keeping it to myself and not sharing it, and then maybe resenting the partner for not asking. Dialogue fosters trust, making it easier to approach delicate subjects. If we have this frequent dialogue with our children, then when it comes to speaking about the things that are a bit more delicate and maybe private, they'll already have that trust with you, and they'll be more willing to share this with you. And I think I'll give you just a piece of advice from clergy to you guys, because we hear a lot of things, that are very private. The first thing, like I learned, is you gotta have the poker face, all right? So you have to have the poker face. No matter how bad the sin is, it's the same face, right? And in here, there's maybe something else going on, but on the outside, it's the same. So we kind of have to have the same, idea with our kids. I remember when one of our children was like in kindergarten, he came home and he he came home and he said like the B word, and I wasn't there, thank God, because I don't know what I would have done. But thankfully, my wife was there, and with all like calmness, she said, "Sweetie, where did you hear that word?" I'd have been like, "Where are you getting that? Where are you saying that from? Who told you this?" And I'm gonna go. So just very calmly, able to acquire, and then we explained to him, "This is not something we say. Do you hear us say this?" No. So it was never repeated after that. Again, this dialogue, if we have this kind of relationship with them, it makes it easy for them to speak about these sensitive subjects. Closeness in marriage is sustainable by daily intentional conversation beyond logistics or problems. This is maybe a problem with married couples as they grow in years, is that all our discussion are logistical or just problems. But there's not that casual dialogue about how your day was, what do you want to do, what's this, what's that. Oh, this is very nice, you decorated nicely. There's no dialogue. It's okay, who's going to pick up the kids, where are we going to go, what time am I going to be there, they have this assignment due, they need to do this, you did this and she did this, your responsibility was this. So it's just solving problems and logistical things. Again, if we want to develop that closeness, there should be that casual dialogue. And sometimes getting out of our normal routine is good for this. Again, like going on vacation is a good time for this. Going on walks together, if you're able to, where there's really nothing to do except just talk with each other, even if you have nothing to say. But it gives that space, to have that casual conversation. Also promotes harmony. The family will be united in direction and value when there's dialogue. I forget the exact statistic, but I read it many times. I don't remember exactly what it is, but they say that like a family that are children that eat with their parents together, like I think 4 or 5 days a week, they're much less likely to have like premarital relationships, fail in school, addicted to drugs, and so on. So all of the categories maybe we consider as being, something we're concerned about with our kids, it decreases when there's that space for dialogue, even just if it's those maybe 30 minutes for dinner. So it helps unite us in direction and value. It's important that children see their parents model healthy dialogue. I can't stress this enough, because, again, all what children know are what they see in their parents. So if they see in their parents they don't communicate or they fight only, then this is what they assume is normal. And this is how they will carry on their relationships. And maybe it might not be as noticeable when they're young, but when they get older, this is what you'll find, that they're either fighting with kids, or adults at school, or they're not having a healthy dialogue. So it's important that we model this in front of them. Uh, Also, it promotes the exchange of ideas and experiences, as we said, creates an avenue of exchange. Through healthy dialogue, I'll be able to impart to my children and spouse my life experiences, which is important. This is part of sharing our, life together, is our experiences. And again, this will allow the children to gain from our experience and not make the same mistakes. And again, as long as we have this frequent dialogue, then the safety and security is there, where no one's going to be judged or condemned. But again, it's one family, and we all make mistakes. Even the parents, they make their mistakes. So when they have this maybe vulnerability with their children, again, it creates a safe space for them to share the same. You can also gain from their experiences, your children's experiences. Also, it's important for personal development that we have this dialogue. Successful individuals know how to carry a conversation or a dialogue. It might seem like, okay, when we know this. I'll get to my point in a second. Intelligence is one thing, but communicating information is another thing. I'm sure you've all had that, student maybe when you were in college that was brilliant, but it was very awkward. He couldn't have a conversation. Being smart is one thing, but how to communicate what you know is something totally different. Electronic devices have facilitated communication while also threatening connection. And this is so true. They have much more communication now, and they don't stop. Hours and hours on end. But how many of these are really true connections? Very few. And actually, it keeps them from connecting. Like, what do we need as family or friends to connect with one another? Time in front of each other, right, to connect. What else? No distractions, right? So we need time to connect with no distractions, right? Very good. How many of us have went to a restaurant before and you've seen people sitting at a restaurant together and they're just on their phones together? As if, almost like the person in front of you is not as important as the person that's on the other side of the phone. And of course, it's not polite. If I'm going to give somebody my attention, the one who deserves it is the one who's in front of me, because the one behind the screen has no idea. And again, is whenever that person who's on the other side of the screen is in front of me, then they have my undivided attention. I remember early on in my priesthood, my youngest son, I was like maybe 2 at the time, and I was staying home during the day with him, and I was playing with him. And again, I was new to the priesthood, I didn't know really what was expected and so on. So I had received a couple messages, and I'm sitting on the floor playing with him, and then I just took out the phone real briefly just to check the message and reply in just a few seconds. And then he looks at me, he's like, Daddy. And then he comes up and he like pulls my beard to face him. And then I was like, I got the message. Okay, fine. I put it away and I gave him my undivided attention. So again, these devices, they help us communicate, but they don't help us, connect. How can parents and spouses mitigate the negative effects of electronic devices in the house? It's not a rhetorical question. Okay, so he said designated times, or we can have put it aside. How many of us have children like less than maybe 12, 13 or so? Less than 13-ish. A lot of us. Okay. I don't know about you, and maybe you can share, but what is the response when you tell them turn off the device? With the raise of hands, how many of them say okay from the first time? Oh, that was funny. Okay, how many of them will turn it off before they yell and scream? Nobody? Okay, good. I feel good. Same thing in our house. Right. So then what do we do to mitigate this? Can it be simply, okay, this is going to be no phone time? Because you'll say that, okay, we'll say this hour is no phone time or no device time or no TV time, whatever. But then the time from turning it off to actually implementing it is another hour, just to get them, you know, to stop and to calm down. All right. Oh, of course, for them it's just a second. You know, for us it's like it's the end of the evening is over. I'm trying to learn here, so I need some feedback. Yeah. So have it in a central location. Sure, seeing what they're on, or maybe another option is just sharing with what they're doing. So if they're watching something, you watch with them, and then we turn it off. You turn it off together. Maybe that's an option. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's the big thing. That is the big thing. You know, is to model it. It's like if it's no phone time, then it's parents and children alike, regardless of what business things are going on or service things are going on. Again, it's for a certain period of time, and that time is meant to connect. Yes, Sri.
Probably not having portable devices. You can start off with having a desktop, like in the living room.
Okay, so having a desktop, okay, but they can still play games on it. I remember when I first introduced, and it's being recorded, isn't it? Okay, I won't
Cut
say
it
it.
out.
Huh?
I can cut it out post
I won't
production. It's not live.
edit. Maybe I can use well. All right. Have anybody so does anybody have like a way that you can just turn off the internet and turn off the device remotely without their permission? Yeah, how does that work for you guys? It's very effective.
Yeah.
I have it too. Yeah. For yourself? Oh yeah, if you want to do that for yourself, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that we do so much with our smartphones. Like to go back to a flip phone, it's really convenient. So, but if you're able to do that, that's great. That's wonderful. You can try to hide it for them, but kids are phenomenal, phenomenal. I remember one time I tried to hide, that we didn't eat dinner yet, so I was having a mint, and we have a van, and I was driving, and it was just my youngest son all the way in the back, and I tried to hide a mint before we had dinner, and then as soon as I didn't move my mouth, and he says, "I smell something." I was like, "Oh man!" I was like, "Man, yeah, I did nothing right." So they will find it. They will find it. So yeah, the if having a way to disconnect it is very effective, and you don't have to even be in the room. Like, so you can be in a completely different room. You disconnect it, and they think it broke. In the beginning, they'll think it broke until you start laughing, and then they get it. But it's very effective, like David said. I don't know if anybody has any other suggestions. Oh, you want to hear about the screen time? It doesn't work. Doesn't work. Let me share. Let me share with you how. So I had a kid come to me. Is maybe I should. Always told my wife we just need to be one step ahead. Just one step. We just need to be one step ahead of our kids. So yes.
um, it's confusing to me because it's like, okay, let's put our phones away, let's put technology away, but no, we need to know everything, and our kids need to like be able to like compete against Japan and the
What?
Eastern world. You know what I mean? Like, they can't. They should be able to go know all these back ways to get to. I mean, to me, that's great. I don't know. So it's a very conflicting thing. And like for you, like the phone got introduced for us when Julie was a baby. Like sit still, let me change your diaper, and quit kicking, and that's how the phone got introduced. It's like just we use it as a way of
It's a crutch.
pacifying ourselves
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
right.
we grow up and we're like, no, the kids shouldn't play it. But then it's also like you need to know how to use an Android, an iPhone, and everything. And in school, they give, Chromebooks to the kindergarten classes, and it's like
Yeah.
they have to be very technology savvy, but we're like frowning upon it. So it's very confusing. Like, I don't know. I'm probably the minority in here. Like, I'm just not against the
Ye-
technology stuff.
it has its place, but I don't
Right.
think it has its place for young kids. And the effectiveness actually of technology and screens in the school, of it being effective, the data is not there. That it actually makes them learn more. Actually, I think it's contrary. I think the old school of writing and reading and writing things out and creative thinking is better. Now with in Chat GPT, the creativity has gone down. So but when you go back to like the kids and you give them like the phone as a pacifier and so on, actually that's our problem. We shouldn't do that in the beginning. It's harder for on the parents to deal with the screaming child in the car and when we change them and all of this. But in exchange for that, you know, again, you're training them not to be addicted to screens, and it's a legitimate addiction, legitimate. I had a kid one time many years ago call me. He called me from his he called me from his father's phone. So I thought it was the father. So then over and over again. So we're in between visits, and I pick up the phone. I thought something was wrong. So the kid's hysterical. So I thought something happened to his dad. I was like, "Is your dad okay? Is your dad okay?" He said, "Yes, my dad's okay." I was like, "What happened? What's going on?" He's like, "My dad took my phone away." And I'm like, "Wow, he's really having you laugh, but he was having a legitimate nervous breakdown." And ironically, the next visit I was going to visit a counselor in the school system. And so I just happened to bring it up and I asked her about this kind of screen addiction. And she said, Muna, we had a case of a child come to school, and the dad told the kid, if you take the phone to school without my permission, I will disconnect your line and that will be it. So the kid snuck his phone from behind his father. His father figured it out. He called Verizon and cut off his phone. The kid had such a nervous breakdown. He went to her and the guidance counselor, and they actually had to refer him to a psychiatrist to get him to calm down, and he took medicine. It's crazy. It's really legitimate. So we do ourselves a favor in the long run of limiting it. Like I don't have none of my kids. I have a kid in high school and he doesn't have a phone yet. And in terms of them learning, he learns. He knows stuff. So like even when he gets it, he knows what to do somehow. I don't know how. He doesn't have a phone, but he knows how to do stuff. So I don't think that the learning is something that they'll be deprived of, because eventually they'll get it and they'll pick it up fast. I mean, my third graders know how to tunnel different websites. I don't even know how to do that. So I think the knowledge will get there, but I think that we need to be more concerned about their mental development, and not letting these devices impair that, when they're young. Yes, Awana.
Is the way you prevent that from happening, what you said, is to prevent, when screen time is activated, is to prevent the child from being able to uninstall or reinstall apps, and that way they can't uninstall the app. Which is a good idea anyway, because you don't want your kids to just be able to install any app they want. If they want to install something new, you can do it for them and make sure you approve what it is that they're installing, and so that covers that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, I think there's a difference between just a parent having arbitrary control over their child's devices and being able to cut off the internet at any time, versus saying have a regular, like a system. Child can expect the child can expect that there are certain rules that are applied to him every single day. So that way, instead of it being an arbitrary decision, like, oh, I've decided that, okay, you've used the internet too much today, and then the child is like going to have this argument back and forth. Instead, it's like they know that, okay, I'm allowed to use the internet for a certain amount of time between this time and this time. And so after some time, they get used to that, and then it becomes less of a friction and resistance, because they know that that's what they should be expecting from day to day. So I think having a system like that is important, that the child understands and they can follow, I think, easier.
And actually, this brings up a good. My son doesn't have it yet. He's in ninth grade, but he will get it soon. And for that very fact, because, don't tell him I said that. Okay, no, he's waiting for that, but don't tell him I said that. Because again, you want to teach him how to use it responsibly and be able to tell himself no. Right? So when he's in college and he's studying, he can turn it off and have that discipline. So they do need time where they can, okay, we help them establish that discipline. When there's time off, it's off, whether dad says it or I say it, but I'm going to put it aside. So definitely, what the age is to get a phone, that's another discussion. All right. Let's okay. Anybody else want to add? Okay. Monologues. This is where you just one-way street, right? What are the outcomes of monologues? Well, you find the children in particular are easily distracted. They have a shortened attention span already. They're content with the content is easily forgotten. If again, we can have this discussion, and maybe most of the talk here was a monologue. But the one thing that you guys are going to remember when you go outside is the discussion about the phones, because this is what we all shared in, right? If I asked you what was the sermon on last week, if you asked me what my sermon on was last week, I don't even remember. But if you asked about a discussion we had, we'll remember it, right? Also, monologues are prone to misunderstanding because there's no space to clarify or to elaborate. Again, the loss of interest. Once you start monologuing to your children, the eyes start rolling backwards and they're somewhere else. So there's always that loss of interest. And of course may lead to frustration because they won't feel like they're being heard. So when the conversation ends, when the dialogue ends, what will be the result? There's isolation. And this many forms of isolation, but the emotional walls begin to form. Right? When I feel like I'm not being heard, then the natural response is, then why talk? Right? Then why talk? So the kids would just kind of clamp up and stay quiet. Everything is inside and they don't express anything. And this is why, sometimes where you have like maybe parents who are good people, but maybe are very busy for their children, you'll find the kids all of a sudden might do something very out of character of the family and go way off the deep end. They'll say, how come? Well, maybe there was a lot going on inside, but because there wasn't this dialogue, these walls came up, they didn't feel comfortable to share, and then it just kind of, poured over or made like a volcano and sprouted forth. Recall we all have love tanks, even children, that need to be filled as well. There's the disconnect. They're disconnected with each other and with you. A person may not feel obligated or responsible in a relationship. Again, if there's no dialogue, then I'm not responsible. It's the other person's responsibility. So again, that's disconnecting. Child leaving like a sick or needy parent, and this we'll find maybe later in life. If as a child I felt like my parents neglected me and they were busy with work and everything and didn't really care or fill me with love or emotion, then what happens when the parents go old and they need help, the child feels disconnected, or they don't feel obligated to help because they didn't help me when I needed it. So they'll reciprocate that. And I've seen that. It's a very sad thing to see, to the extent where it can be sometimes borderline cruel, sometimes what children can do to their elderly parents. What can be expected when a child leaves for college or when they get married? If they have a sense of the family as being disconnected, mom and dad are just monologuing, no dialogue, emotional walls go up, then their idea is, I can't wait to leave the house because I don't want to be in this place anymore. Also, you find a lack of empathy. When they feel disconnected, somebody could get hurt and there's no empathy. There's no caring because there's that disconnect already. And if this happens, we need to ask ourselves, like if something happened to you and your kids didn't respond or whatever, this maybe we need to, probe a little bit. Also, there's doubt once the conversation ends. For example, with a husband who stays home at late, if there's no dialogue, then if he comes home late, automatically the spouse thinks there's, some fishy business going on. A child may begin to believe you do not love them. And as crazy as that sounds, because as parents, we know what we do for our kids and we sacrifice everything we have for our children, and everything that we do is out of love for them. But from the child's perspective, they don't see that. They don't see all the intricate details. Like if you ask young kids, okay, your mom and dad love you, they'll say yes if they're happy with you. If they're not happy, they'll say no, and they'll say yes. And you ask them how, they won't like come out really quickly and begin to say, and then they'll take a lot of time to think. And what they say is nothing compared to what you actually really do, right? But to them, they really believe when there's this disconnection that you really don't love them, and to the point where they believe that you even can hate them. Your figure here will be in question. The figure here is the figure like of the authority figure. So if there's no dialogue and the figure of the person who's the authority in my life is under question, then what happens then is that authority figure is extrapolated to other authority figures. So if my parents don't love me, then my teacher must not love me, or I might not be lovable, right? God doesn't love me, you know. The Sunday school servants must not love me because I seem to like talk out in class. So they begin to extrapolate this, and maybe it's not, you know, justified, but this is how they, you know, how they think that it's, you know, it extrapolates to other avenues in their life. The inability to intercept a problem. When the conversation ends, the ability to intercept a problem, you know, fails. And this same kind of principle can be applied to confession. You can have somebody who comes to confession, and they don't come to confession for a year, 2, 3 years later. The next time they come to confession, they're sitting for confession, and they say all of these horrible things maybe that happened. How can this be mitigated? Well, if I come frequently, then when I begin to have the thoughts of doing this misdeed, I'm confessing it. So maybe this can be intercepted, and then I won't go down this horrible path that I ended up on, right? The same thing happens. When I have this dialogue and conversation, all of my misconceptions and my negative feelings towards my spouse or my children can be like intercepted if there's that dialogue. If not, then they just continue to brew and to brew. They may conclude that no one will notice or care. What about constructive dialogue? Of course, it's with love. Express your love when you speak to your spouse and children. And this doesn't necessarily have to be verbal, but nonverbal. Here, the father is sitting down at the same level as his children, as his child. This communicates love. You have my undivided attention. Holding somebody's hand or putting a hand on their shoulder communicates love. Wisdom. Wisdom while we dialogue. And this is, again, wisdom is the application of knowledge or a skill or a craft. So listen before speaking. Again, we always can think about what we want to say as the other person is speaking, but I think it does us, we're better served if we listen, and then we can formulate what we want to say. Look what he says in Proverbs. He says, "He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him." So answering before I hear the matter. So we need to listen first. Use words that heal. Okay, it's very easy in the heat of the moment to shun blame on others or to condemn or criticize your children. It's very easy because it's a stressful situation and somebody must be to blame, and it's not me, so I must, do this. But we need to use words of healing. We need to, what is it that I want to get out of this? And sometimes as a parent, when you're really upset, it's not the time to maybe correct the matter. It's just the time to settle down. So something happens, say, okay, go to your room, or you say, just stay here, I'll be right back, and you go collect your thoughts, and then you come back, and then you have this dialogue. It really works if we can do it. And you'll find the child has time to also de-escalate, and then you can have a more reasonable conversation. St. James says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield." Again, this is wise. Willing to yield. When is it time to yield or just not insist? I can say a principle to my child, and they may not agree. Maybe it's not imperative that they agree at the moment, right? It's enough that it just went into their head, they heard it from you, and you model it, and it'll settle, and you repeat the thing, right? Nobody learns from just one time, so we need to be patient. The timing and tone, all right? The timing in which I say something and the dialogue and the tone by which I say it. Wisdom discerns what matters are most important. Like sometimes there are things that, okay, they're annoying, but it's not worth the discussion. I can live with it, or I can do it myself. My wife put the dishes in the wrong way in the dishwasher. Doesn't need a discussion. Just go and fix it. Right? So no big deal. The bed's not made. Okay, make it. No big deal. Right? Or just live with it not being made. If you remember, when the Lord fed the multitude, He asked the disciples how they can rectify the situation. What can we do? And they came up with different plans, right? Well, with 300 denarii won't be enough to go and feed these people, and all we have are 5 loaves and 2 fish. So He had allowed the dialogue for them to speak, although He knew exactly what He was going to do. But this made them a part of the solution when He allowed them to dialogue. So when He said, okay, sit them down in groups of 50, they said, okay, we said our plan, and it really wasn't feasible. Let's see what He has to say. And we said, okay, this is my plan. They began to implement it, and then they miraculously fed all of these people with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. Encouragement helps a lot in dialogue. Don't always begin with criticism. This is, again, especially with children, this is something, Gendi, that's we need to maybe train ourselves on, is not to begin with criticism. Some warnings: pay attention to when they speak. Don't cut them off when they speak. Don't turn a dialogue into an argument. It's very easy to do. If it's going to escalate, we need to find ways to de-escalate it and then revisit it later. Do not get sidetracked. Kids are excellent at this, right? You're having a dialogue with them, and then they'll mention something else to steer you off a different direction. So we need to be very good about bringing them back and saying, no, we're talking about this now, not about what somebody did to you in Sunday school. Okay. Make time for the dialogue. This picture is about a family who's like cooking together or preparing a meal together or setting the table together. This is great time to dialogue. Okay, we're doing an activity together. We're going to eat together. So part of the preparation we kind of do together. You get the drinks for everyone. You set the table, or you clean the table. Mom will finish cooking the dinner. And so on. So somebody does the dishes. So it's a good time to have that, share. And while we're doing this, you'll find there's conversation kind of going on. So it's a nice time. It shouldn't be not if there is time, but we should make the time. There always should be time. And as I mentioned earlier, eating together is a great way to have this time for dialogue. The last point here I said is engage silence. A lot of times when there's something going on inside, the first response is silence. So if the silence persists, we need to engage the silence. What's going on? What's on your mind? Did I do something? What's bothering you? Is something happening at school today? We can't just say, okay, they're just quiet. Even the children who are known to be quiet children, they still have an inner dialogue and have experiences. And there are some kids who will never say anything unless you ask them. I can't tell you how many times parents would come and there's a problem at school and they say, well, no, they never told me. Well, maybe they're quiet and you never asked. So if you never asked, they're not going to tell you. And this is true. It's very, you'll get, if you ask a child, okay, how was your day? It was good. But then you got to ask details, you find out it wasn't very good, right? What did so-and-so, oh, this person, took my lunch. Oh, this person threw or wrote on my back with marker, or this person did this. Again, only they will never tell you unless you begin to ask and prod. So engage the silence. Any questions or comments? No questions? Good. Yes, Mary.
A child. What's the best way to approach a child who is not a talker, just is one of few words?
Yeah. I think asking open-ended questions. Make them, don't just say, how was your day? Yes. Did you have a nice time at lunch? Yes. How was field day? Good. Let them explain. Okay, tell me about your day. What was the best part of your day? And I'll tell you, with my kids, for whatever reason, when you put them to bed, this is when everything comes out. I mean, they're quiet, or they might be quiet the whole day, but then somehow, when you go to put them to bed, everything starts coming out. So maybe try planning to put them to bed a little bit early, and then sit there with them, and you'll find they will talk about everything and anything with no walls, right? So maybe try that kind of time when they're, you know, they make themselves completely vulnerable, and maybe they might be willing to spill the beans. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not that I'm I'm just wondering, like, is that is that natural? Like, if all of our kids are doing that, is that
Yeah, I think
Okay.
they're more vulnerable. It's just
Oh.
like us. Like actually, when we're tired or stressed, this is when Satan fights us the most because we're more vulnerable, right? When angry, I'm more prone to say something that I wouldn't usually say, right? But for them, this time when they sleep, they're exhausted, they're more vulnerable, all their barriers come down, and then it's just like free for all. And sometimes it can be a long time, so you gotta okay, enough talking, gotta sleep.
But I just wanted to share something
Yeah.
that I remembered. So our last parenting meeting, Kristen Assad gave it, and it was about technology and how to manage it. And so, if anybody missed it, it's on the YouTube page. But she talked a lot about giving. She just gave a lot of suggestions about how to manage this in the household and like ideas about like contracts if you're going to give your child the phone, like how to, what kind of a contract to have with them, or the discussion of telling them like, are you going to tell them this is their phone, or are you going to tell them this is your phone that you are allowing them to use, things like that. So if anybody's worried about that or thinking about a device, it's on the YouTube page under the St. Monica parenting meeting. She gave a lot of good advice and raised a lot of questions about that.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay.
I just texted it anonymously, but I'm just gonna read it.
You could have said I'm reading the anonymous question.
Okay. Well, there's two, so you don't know which one's mine. But
A good curveball. We'll look at
Okay.
Miriam's face. And
Yeah.
she'll tell us.
Okay, so how do you get your spouse to stop looking at what you're doing? No, what does a good phone plan look like? Like we talked about.
good what?
this, A good phone plan. So, like for work, you need a cell phone, and now we work from home, so the kids have to see you use a phone. But obviously, they see you and they want to play, and you're on the phone with work. And how do you and your spouse, like, how do you come up with a good plan, or what's an ideal plan look like? Because eventually, they're still gonna want a phone, whether it's their grandparents or something. Like, what does that look like? I guess
Well, a plan for them or like
for both,
for them to know their
like
boundaries.
as a household, how do you decide, like, what kind of decisions or factors should you come up with to kind of come up with something? Because you're always going to say, I need the phone to be more productive, right? That's kind
Who?
of
As
as
parents?
a parent, yeah.
That's fine. They're already accustomed that adults do stuff that they don't. Like we drive, they can't drive. So they're already used to things that this is, for adults, and this is not. You know, I saw a video actually once, fairly recently, and the person who was speaking said that in Australia, they social media is banned for anybody under 16. So there's data all over that says this isn't healthy for them. So um, I'm probably not the right person to ask for a plan because I'm still.
Like right now, they'll go and look at pictures, for example, and
Yeah.
and it feels like it's sort of you're driving. It's like, all right, here's the phone. Just let me or focus on something. But it's like the easy button almost in life.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to figure out. Eventually, they're gonna see you use it. They're gonna want it, and it doesn't feel like it hurts them, or it doesn't look to them. They don't see that it hurts them, but.
We put two folders, my daughter has like her own folder on my phone, and on her iPad, like there's certain folders that are mine, where she thinks it's mine. But so when she has my phone, or when I'm on my phone, I show her like I'm not in your folder. I'm not in the games folder. I'm not like I'm in Google Drive. I'm in, doing stuff for work. So it's very obvious. Like my screen doesn't look like your iPad would look when you're using it. So I did that, and then I showed her like this folder, like it's something that I would never use. Like I'm not playing the same games. I use my phone for my work. If I need to make money, I have to check my phone while we're playing or whatever it might be. And I think when you're on your own business, like we do, it's like you don't get to turn your phone off. Like that's not an option.
Yeah.
And but I think me physically showing her like this is what I'm doing on my phone was more impactful in my case. I don't know. Like it just made more sense to her. Like, oh, you're not just sitting here playing Roblox. You know. Yeah, like I have to be. Do you want that toy? I have to work to pay for that toy. Like this isn't my. Just because I'm not at a computer, like Dad might be in his office, doesn't mean I'm not working.
Yeah.
Like I do interior design, so for me, I don't need to be in front of a desk. I can just, do stuff on my phone. So I feel like she thinks like I'm literally playing the same games as her, and then like once in a while I have to go on Instagram to see what a client
And that's the time they're
me.
going to come and see your
And
screen.
then she's like, you're
I
on
know.
Instagram.
That's
Yeah.
always.
And it's like, oh no, yeah, I'm on Instagram for work,
That's always the case. But there definitely needs to be like some training because it's inevitable. They will eventually have the phone, and this is not going anywhere. So there needs to be some, some training, and how the exposure is. It's. And again, I think some children are different than others. Some are more prone to addiction, and some are not. Maybe like for example, some kids they like sports, so even if you gave them a phone, they'd rather be outside playing basketball or soccer. So I think it really depends on the child. And some kids you're like, never giving you anything.
Also, I don't know if this necessarily will work for all kids, but maybe for some kids, like my approach to these kinds of things is try to put as much responsibility on the kid as possible to help teach them something so they can earn the things that they like to do, while at the same time protecting them from overdoing it because they don't understand the danger of overdoing things. So for instance, you could say to your child, let's say your child is, 8, and you have a plan that you maybe want them to have a phone when they're like 14. Okay, you don't want them to have a phone now. You can tell them the reasons why having a phone now is dangerous is because of this, this, and this. Maybe they don't fully understand it, or you can't fully explain why. But that's the reason why adults have phones, because they need them and they're responsible in how they use them, or they should be, and why you at your age you can't. But our plan is that if you continue to grow responsibly and mature over these next few years, then you should be able to have a phone by this time. And here is what I want to see for you to do, so that I will then decide that you are responsible enough to have a phone at that time. If you put the responsibility on them, then they begin to see it's like I can earn it, right? I can earn it by, obeying from the first time. I can earn it by always being honest when I do something wrong. I can earn it by going to church and, not complaining about being in the liturgy. I can earn it by praying. I can earn it by reading the Bible. And we're talking about a long-term plan, like not just something that you say you're going to do it today and then you get rewarded tomorrow. So it also teaches them how to work for a long-term goal other than just something that you're going to get immediately. So again, I'm not saying necessarily that every child that we'll work with, but I think that principle is important to help teach kids that you can earn something and that you work for it, and that at the same time they're learning important skills that they need, so that when they do get that phone, they will be responsible.
Yeah, and also guiding them when you do give them. Like my older son has like an Apple Watch, so he can do some texting and things like that. So, even how they use it. Like for example, we were in Carline a few days ago, and I fell asleep as usual, and he was awake, but he was on his watch, and the cars in front of us all went, and he didn't even notice until the person behind us honked. So then I woke up. I had no idea where I was. I didn't know what was going. I was like, "Am I driving? Is everything?" So I woke up scared, and then I told him after. I was like, you were so consumed in what you were doing, you didn't notice your surroundings. I was like, this is dangerous, for driving. You can't be consumed with something, not aware of your surroundings. So again, these are all teaching moments, when they're still young. Okay, you need to be aware, be able to put it down when you're driving. And I'm speaking, I need to speak to myself first.
A couple more questions came from the website on the thing. Should we restrict cell phone use in areas?
I think so. And if we're gonna do it at the dinner table, the prayer room should be the same. And I think there should be more spaces. They said, maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but in psychology, they say in like to keep the areas of the each room in the house to its designated function. For example, if you do your work in your bedroom, you have problems falling asleep. You know, if you eat in the office, you know, so they said it's better to keep things where they belong. So phones in the bedroom, is a bedroom is a place where they sleep. It's not where they get on their phone. And you'll find they actually the kids stay up until 3 and 4 a.m. on their phone, and they'll wait till the parents go to sleep. They'll get under the covers, and then they develop these bad, you know, study habits and this bad cycle where they end up going to sleep at 4 a.m., waking up at 1 p.m. and it's just, you know, so maybe keeping the phones only in the public spaces in the house. Again, it will help them as well. So if there's ever a temptation, there's eyes all around me, so that, you know, it'd be less likely to look at something, you know, inappropriate.
And then there was one more on here so far. It said, should we tell our child that we did not grow up with the electronic devices when restricting their use of cell phones?
I do. I tell them, you know, when we had like our games were like on Atari, and they had the tennis was like a bar, a rectangle bar, and the ball was a square, and that was super entertaining for us. And they're like, they look at us like we were crazy. Yeah, and then I once what is it? You know the save icon. Do you know what that is? You guys probably know. It's a floppy disk, right? The kids have no idea what that is. I was like, they don't know where this came from, right? So, yeah, the 3D printed the save button. So I tell them, you know, and you know, I tell them of all the good days we had without, you know, devices or computers, and what we used to do as kids. You know, actually, that's one of the things I recall a few years ago. Actually, when it was the year where the December 25th was like a day we had liturgy. I don't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, but I remember coming back from church all the way home, and I did not see one child in the street. And I was like, I remember when I was growing up, Christmas, everybody's in their street, either showing off their shoes, riding their new bike, nobody was on the street. And I was like, I was stunned. I was like, oh, that's pretty pathetic. They're probably all inside video gaming or doing something inside on some device. It really was sad. There's not that, you know, sense of community. Anyways. Okay. Thank you all for your time. Glory be to God forever. Amen.